But then I believe that in a soccer game that they analysed, and I'm not saying this is necessarily true in rugby league or the sports I work in, but 85% of sprints were curvilinear in nature. Okay, so that all of a sudden we know, okay, this is also preparing guys for game demands.
That was Graeme Morris, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. If there's one thing that has completely changed my approach to supplementation, it's been finding performance herbalism. Herbalism is different than your typical supplements, particularly because herbalism works by harnessing the power of nature. It involves using tried and tested, high-grade, well-sourced herbal compounds to make a difference in your energy, strength, boost your hormonal system, and improve your overall vitality. That's what today's sponsor, Lost Empire Herbs, can bring to you. Whether it's through Shilajit resin, which has been highly recommended by many coaches for improved strength, mushroom tinctures for immune support, combination packages such as the Phoenix formula, which is one of my favorites, Lost Empire Herbs has the supplements that will help you in achieving your performance training goals. If you want to check out some of my favorite herbs, you can head to lostempireherbs.com/justfly and use the code JOEL15 at checkout. That's JOEL15 at checkout for 15% off. Lost Empire Herbs is a great company, and I hope you get a chance to check them out. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to welcome back to the show guest Graeme Morris. Graeme is an athletic development coach and leads the rehab program at the Wests Tigers of the National Rugby League. Graeme has many years of experience working in professional rugby, as well as consulting and training a variety of field-based and combat athletes, including world and Australian champions in Muay Thai. In athletic performance, it's very helpful to understand and engage with many iterations of movement and sport practice, many ways to move, to train, to lift, to play. On today's podcast, Graeme will be speaking about his time and experiences in the martial arts and what that has offered him in his traditional role in strength and performance and rugby. And he'll also be talking about some aspects, more expansive aspects of speed training, such as lateral speed, curvilinear running, different variations of curvilinear speed. We'll be talking about ideas on staggered stance lifting, inertial lifting, and much more on the show today. It was wonderful talking to Graeme, and I'm excited to get this episode rolling. Let's get to 396 here with Graeme Morris. Graeme, it's great to have you back on the show, and I know you spent quite a bit of time competing, training in the martial arts in your time kind of between strength and conditioning or typical strength and conditioning jobs or team sport jobs. Tell me a little bit about that experience and what you learned from it.
Well, yeah, I think since last time we chat, I was living in Melbourne at the time, and the back end of COVID, like the funding of the position I was in was cut, and then I basically all the gyms across Australia were kind of like opening, closing through COVID and all that, and that's when I streamlined a lot of things to online, and what I basically did was just packed up everything, threw it in storage, and I flew a one-way ticket to Thailand. And obviously I'm an avid follower of combat training. I had an injury back in the day, probably 10, 12 years ago, where I had a lot of nerve damage in my leg from my pre-existing back injury, and surgery didn't fix it. So a lot of running demands was kind of cut down for me. But I was introduced to Muay Thai, kickboxing, and I started getting into that into my early 30s. And so when I went to Thailand, I trained quite a bit for that. And for 5 months I was there, and I was put in a fight team after a week. With a lot of professionals. There was some really, really highly ranked fighters, and I basically trained for 3-4 hours a day, most days, in the humidity, the heat of Thailand, the grueling training. And I ended up having one fight over there, like in a big stadium fight, which was a pretty cool experience at the age of 39. So, but yeah, I was training really, really high level guys, and I learned a lot of things about performance that I probably didn't really think about as a strength and conditioning coach while I was doing that. I can go into that if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so like for what training for specifically like a fight or something like that, I think specificity is just so important. You need to get good at your sport, and it's really, really noticeable when you're training for a fight, because nothing really else matters. So
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that you're focusing on is like, can you strike better? Can you attack better? So I think, as my buddy here always says, like, become a PhD in your sport. So you really, really want to focus a lot of your energy in on that. And then everything else is kind of implemented around that. But I would say that over there, what I really found out was that the training environment is so, so important. The level of coaching that you have around you can make such a difference, a huge amount of difference. Are you getting taught the correct things? Are you getting taught the correct tactics? Do you have good training partners? If you get training partners is so and so important. The people around you, are they challenging you? Are they pushing you? Are they assisting you becoming better every single day? So when I come back to sport, I always think, are we having a training environment that can sort of lead to success? You want to produce a culture there, but that's not only really demanding and upholding standards, but it's still enjoyable to come to every single day. And when you're training like that every single day in the heat, we're training 3-4 hours a day. It's really, really, really hard on your body. Now, I'm not going to say you're overtraining, but you're training to the point where sometimes you're looking at it and you're like, this training is not looking that great. I'm not striking well. I'm really, really fatigued. But on the back end of that, you're not going to stop because you're preparing for a fight and you're trying to get better. And in your head, you can't stop because you know that this person that you might be competing against is putting that extra work in. So, outside of that, it's so important just to get things like sleep right, your nutrition right, your hydration right, the ability to recover between sessions becomes so valuable. And it's something that I probably didn't previous to that. Like, I just cared more about the training side of things and going to scenarios like that, you realize how important lifestyle and health is for overall performance. Then outside of that, like, it's always interesting when you're sparring or you're training with guys on a daily basis and you look at these 4 coactives we always talk about in sport, being a technical, tactical, psychological, physical. I think that, it's important as an athlete to kind of find out what your rate limiter of performance is, because like in combat, you'll find guys that are so skillful that they're more superior. But then you'll find 2 guys that are very skillful together, and the guy that is more physically stronger or is better conditioned will win. Or you might find someone who's not as skillful, is not as potentially not as conditioned, but he's producing the right tactics. He's doing the right things at the right time. And then psychology behind everything. Some people might be so drained before they go into an actual fight, or the things they have around them drains their energy. So that when they're actually in the fight, they don't have much energy. So I think looking at from an outside perspective, highlighting what is important and where your rate limiter is what's can really increase performance.
Yeah, the 4 coactives. It's been a while since I had heard that mentioned on this podcast, but it's so huge. And so you were almost, from what I gather, in working with the martial arts, and just as you were talking, you think about like the maps you could, the graphs you could make with the coactives, or like the cross chart and the dot sits on a different place, of your different skill level. But how would you say, or are you saying basically that in like fighting or martial arts or things like that, like there can be almost a bigger spread of why someone's good than perhaps like a team sport or a more common sport, or is that not quite the case?
I'm not sure if that's the case, but I think that if someone's really superior in one aspect, it can be highlighted more in individual sport like combat.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
Are you saying like it's in combat, it's easier to see because it's an individual sport? Yeah.
It might be made up and different, different aspects. But whereas an individual, like if you have a real limiter in performance, it's going to be highlighted probably pretty quickly.
Yeah, it just shines brighter versus, and I think versus an individual sport versus like my background, track and field, there's not, it's not like that in terms, yes, there are the coactives and things like that, but I think it's a little bit different than something where there's more strategy and tactics and things like that, like martial art. And, and it would make sense that, there's nowhere to hide in one-on-one versus a team sport. You can kind of maybe hide in the shuffle a little bit, so to speak. Obviously you have your skill coach and things like that, but maybe.
And also like, I think there's different scenarios that can occur many different times that you might not know that's your limiter in performance.
Yeah.
Because each opponent could be different. Like you don't know what you're going to get typically. Things change straight away. Whereas like, as you're talking about track and field a lot of the time, it's a race.
Yeah.
It's probably less outside influences that are going to change that scenario.
Yeah.
I believe.
I should say that
it's probably not as chaotic.
Yeah.
Nature.
The technical is absolutely there in track, but the tactical, there's, racing like the mile or whatever, how my race tactics going to unfold. But like outside of that, there's definitely not nearly as much of that as in team sport and things like that. It makes me think too, like and I know this is, we're talking a little bit more about the physical pieces throughout the show, but I always am so interested in looking at the whole picture, and it makes me think too, I wonder if like skill coaches or like the coaches who are spending more time on the one-on-ones, it makes me think almost if you like look at martial arts, it's one-on-one and someone wins and someone loses. And there's also the consequence of it being a combat, like you get hit. And it makes me wonder if I almost feel like maybe skill coaches could learn something from the way martial arts are put together with the coactives and how they set up their one-on-ones and consequence and learning from, said activity. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I think a lot of these really high level combat coaches probably they just do this without even thinking. Because that's what they're exposed to on a daily basis. And it probably comes very natural to them. Yeah.
Yeah. So from your perspective, I know now you're doing athletic performance, like rehab type work. Is there anything, at least from a mindset, from spending that time in the combat world, coming back now working in rugby, back in, I guess, a role that was more like what you had before? Is there anything that's, just the gears in your head turning a little bit differently after that experience?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, I think like creating an environment that is challenging, upholding standards. Like martial arts is very disciplined, but on the flip side of that, you still want to push the culture in that, and but you still want to make it enjoyable. You want guys to rock up every day and enjoy their training because that's their job. Just like anyone else, you want to enjoy your work. So how do you foster an environment where we're pushing standards but still having enjoyment in the process? So I think that's something really important, and just try and really I guess, teach younger athletes and all that, the importance of health, looking after your body, and all these little things that can add up and create big things down the line. Yeah. Because you're looking for that. You're just looking for 1%ers, always looking for 1%ers. So where can we achieve this?
Do you think that the combat sports too, having weight classes also plays into that, like working with, because you mentioned like nutrition, taking care of yourself. And if you don't have necessarily like a fine weight class, I imagine there might be a little more wiggle room in other sports, so maybe that added consequence as well, just to tie that in. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I think in professional teams now, we have a lot of people have like standards, right? Body fat standards. That's why like a lot of these conditioning tests, are they highly specific towards the sport? Probably not, but it tells you have normative data that tells you you're either fit or you're unfit. And all the players know what a good time is for a certain, like in rugby league, we use what we call a 1.2 kilometer Bronco time trial, which is a 0 to 20 meter return, 0 to 40 meter return, 0 to 60 meter return, 5 times continuously. It's 1.2 kilometers. Maybe it's 29 shuttles. But, it's a very basic fitness test. Is it specific to our sport? Some level of specificity, but probably not. But every single player knows what a good time is and what not a good time is. And when they return to training or when they come back, they know what the standards are, whether they're fit enough or they're not fit enough. And from their body fat testing and all that type of thing, we can say you're up to standards, you're not up to standards. So I think that's the kind of things you have to do to try and push this level of professionalism and make sure guys are up to scratch and ready to perform. Yeah. It's interesting. I guess part of it too is I think that which you also perhaps can't put into words. I know for myself, like just spending time with, back when I was at Cal, working with the swim teams, which are always up at the top of the NCAA, there's just something I think your intuition picks up with how things should be, and that you just start to feel like the next setting you go into, you just kind of carry that with you. And maybe some of that almost goes unspoken in a way, but I think it also bears the importance of, working with different teams, sports, levels of talent, things like that.
Yeah. It's definitely, it probably depends on the people around and the connection you have within the team, and things like that, driving that environment as well. Because
I was going to ask you, I know we mentioned this a little bit before we pushed record, but I did think it was interesting, the like the crossover. And I know Kier's Winham Flass talked about this back in his rugby days, but like introducing grappling or working with grappling.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that in rugby over there, they have contact coaches who do all that stuff. And I find it, I feel like that'd be a really fun job to be the contact coach.
Well, first of all, to be a contact coach, it's probably pretty well known. You have to have few screws loose. They're all absolute maniacs. Well, look, at the top level, most clubs are going to have a contact coach. Perhaps if you're at a lower level, if you're a strength and conditioning coach, you might have to introduce some levels of that grappling type stuff, which can be beneficial. But at the higher level, you're going to have a contact coach in. And as I was saying before, like at the beginning, it's a little bit more, the beginning of a preseason, it's a little bit more raw, a little bit more general in nature. You're building that body armor that's going to, lead into the competition period where you're trying to develop the body armor around the shoulders and neck. And basically, there's a lot of collisions. There's a lot of sweat. There's a lot of sore bodies. And as I develop that, it's still a high technical element as that, but it's getting more specific as they go throughout preseason. I mean, it's not my job. We have a really good contact coach, but as we're getting to preseason now, the contact on the field is a lot higher. So then the contact in the contact sessions has to reduce and becomes more technical, more probably getting guys systemized, teaching players how to work together in defense to try and nullify the attack, because the contact load on the field is probably increasing. So you kind of had this seesaw of throughout the preseason leading into in-season. And then during the competition period, a lot of that contact stuff will drop off because guys are just trying to recover from the previous game. You have this period of recovery where, you get a couple of depending on the turnaround of the games, you might have a couple high training sessions, and then you're basically looking for that readiness so that you play at a high standard for the next game day. So the contact throughout the competition period at training will dramatically drop off because you get it in the games.
Yeah, I feel like
the first 4 or 5 weeks, if you ever get a chance to look at a contact session, you have to go over.
It's on my bucket list after talking to you. It's on my bucket list to go to one of those, like general. Well, I was just thinking too, like what a fun thing. Cause like you said, on the lower level, it is something like a strength or physical prep coach could, general roughhousing, general contact type stuff. And I was thinking about is it like really intense Red Rover or something? Or like, or like a mosh pit? Like,
there's a whole bunch of different things, but what I say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's probably definitely something that happens in the first 4 or 5 weeks of a preseason for a lot of the contact sessions for sure.
Yeah. It made me think a little bit, like I also had to kind of smile in the sense of, I think when we just think of like fitness or play, long story short, I remember when I went to, Rafe Kelly, who's been on this podcast a number of times, I went to his Return to the Source retreat. And one of the things we did in one of the introductory sessions was like, it was kind of like a mosh pit. Like no one was taking each other out, but it was like just a big group of people and you just run through and you kind of run into people. Try not to, it was more mixed ages and groups. You weren't trying to hurt anybody. But just doing that kind of thing is, you forget how much fun that kind of thing is, And I think we get kind of far away from that sometimes.
Yeah. And like, don't get me wrong. It's not all about just being brutally strength and being violent and things like that. There's a huge skill element of it. And you'll see this because the strongest guys in a weight room aren't the best wrestlers or grapplers necessarily. And I can say that 100%. Like one of our strongest wrestlers, grapplers, is not the strongest guy in the weight room, and he's far from it. But he has that different type of strength that, some people call it farm strength, or, He just has that grapple strength. And there's a high skill element to grappling and strength work. I can even say that from my point of view, from a Muay Thai. In my gym, we have a Thai athlete who's had over 300 fights. Okay, so he started fighting since he was 7. He's had 300 plus fights, and he fights at 70 kilograms. And when I clinch him, I'm 100 kilograms out myself. I find it very, very difficult. He's so sneaky, he's so tricky. I swear to God, I tried to get him many years ago to do a bodyweight split squat, and he nearly folded himself in half. He hadn't been introduced to these type of things, but he had the technical ability of clinching and grappling, and he was just so strong in those positions. But if you try to put a bar on his back or something like that, he's never been introduced to it, it'll probably fold him in half. So, skill is definitely specific. Strength can be very specific in nature. And there's a high things like wrestling, clinching, tackling, and things like that. People think it's a lot of brute force, but no, there's a huge skill element to it. So you have that skill acquisition side of it, physical properties that relate to that skill.
Yeah, I saw one of your videos you had posted in your fight training. I think it was called like the Dominator or something. And it's hard to describe. All I could describe, it's like almost like a bike handle that you push down to the ground, and it's connected to some weight stack.
Yeah, honestly, that's actually, that piece of machinery is in most rugby league.
Oh, interesting.
It's a piece of machinery is probably developed for a lot of rugby league teams. And it's kind of like a handle where you're pulling it towards you. So you're using a lot of back strength and pulling strength in conjunction with your legs. And then you have to rotate your core around and push it down. And to be honest, I wouldn't say it's specific in any type of way to grappling, but it's probably the opposite way you should be doing it. But the muscles used probably transfer over to that type of movement. It's back in that connection from the ground up through your legs, through to your core, and with your upper body.
Today's podcast is sponsored by TeamBuilder. You can get a free trial of their training portal software by heading to teambuilder.com, and you can use the code JUSTFLY for a 30-day free trial. Sign up today with TeamBuilder and see what they can do for you for your training programs and your team. Yeah, thinking about too, like the difference, I think that keys into, in many ways, I guess it's like, well, what makes strength specific on the field? What's perceiving and reacting things? But like, especially when you're fighting or grappling, your sensory environment is so much more. Like you feel like, where did your opponent's weight shift? And you instantly have to figure out where to, react. It's reactive would be the best way I could put it. And I say that too, because I feel like that's like one of my, I actually haven't been in combat sports. I would love to at some point, but one of my strengths has always been like a reactivity. Like if there's something to react to and then apply force to, I'm a lot better at that than I am just like my maxes at the power lifts are not very good compared to my reactive ability.
Yeah, but like if you put yourself in a better position than your opponent, and you're, say you're in the same weight class, or it don't even have to be, but if you're in a better position to produce force and they're off balance, then you'll probably win most times. Yeah. And that's why there's such a large skill element to it. Can you get the right leverages, get in the right position to produce power, and then put them in positions that they can't really produce power as well. And that's when the skill element comes down to it, the body awareness, the reactivity, getting in correct positions. Yeah.
When we had talked last time, Graeme, you were getting into, or you had talked a little bit about, and I think this was the end of the show, but doing different like oscillating lift training or oscillating movement, and mentioning how that was really beneficial for kicking ability. And I was curious, I think you had, I don't know how long you had been doing that work at the time, but I was curious in the time since we last spoke, because I've done a few podcasts on oscillating strength and performance, and I'm a big fan. And have you done any more? Is that something you're doing now outside of even fighters with the rugby group? I'd be curious how you're integrating that, or what your thoughts are in that time since.
I do it with a lot of some of my combat athletes that have a high level. They're already quite well. They have a pretty good level of strength training already. So they already have the ability to produce force. They probably have that experience. So I'll introduce that with them, especially during things like fight camp, where I don't want to overload them with huge amounts of load. So you can use a lot of lighter loads in those positions. And as you said before, I think the ability to relax and contract really quick, make someone twitchy is really, really important. I do a lot of my online class as well, field based athletes, but I only sprinkle it in here and there. And then I think, you know, it's pretty cool. I like, is it Matt McInnes, the plus bios guy? Like, I like how he does it with the deep tier options, and you're just oscillating out of those positions and you're yielding and overcoming in those positions, especially those deeper joint ranges. I think that's really important. And it's probably something I'm going to start doing. Like, I don't run the strength program at the rugby club where I am now, but like, I do a lot of the high end return to play for the rehab side of things. And I think that definitely could have a place there. The back end, just putting a little bit of icing on the cake at the back end there, putting that in. The thing is as well, but you also got to also understand, like, with some of these types of methods, when you're in a team scenario as well, it's got to fit in with the holistic nature of what all the other coaches want as well. So, you know, you don't always get exactly what you want. Whereas if you're doing something individually, or when you're just a private coach, you can be a bit more, you can explore a bit more with these things. You might have this intuitive nature that you think this works. And if your athlete has trust in it, it's easy to implement. Whereas in a team scenario, like, multiple coaches are going to have input. And then, you know, that certain thing might not get a tick of approval. So you might not get to have the full say, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it has a place. Just sprinkle it in there, here and there, at certain times of the year. And I think it works really well for that return to play as well. It's something that someone getting those deeper joint ranges, isolating that position, getting stronger in those positions, teaching the body how to switch on, switch off. And the problem is with these type of things, it's like probably not a whole bunch of research behind it. But, you know, when we do these things within our training, within our team environment, these are case studies. And for me, that is research in my particular group of athletes that I'm working with. Maybe it's not a meta-analysis that's not going to get tick of approval from everyone else, but my training within my bunch of athletes or clients that I'm doing, for me, that's research.
Yeah. Oh,
if that makes sense.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it develops your intuition. I'm definitely on board with that. And like, I certainly think that counts as research in my book. I was going to ask, with the oscillating. So you mentioned like team sport, like when an athlete has like a bunch of coaches and they're already doing like so much varied explosive work that probably is a little bit hard to track, you know, too, like the extent of it. I almost wonder if, like, it's almost like the safe route from, if we're talking the strength side, well, hey, let's just do the general work here and not try to, you know, it's like the more specific things you try to, or the bigger piece of the pie you try to grab, in some ways, it's almost safe, a good home base just to start with the general. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
100%.
Yeah.
What I've found is as well, Joel, over the years, that I've probably got back to more basic work, especially for, let's say, in the rugby league populations, because they're getting so much specificity on the field. And I found this myself, Joel, even when I was training for my fight, is that general training, general weight training, just going through just traditional movement patterns, and being probably doing less like oscillatory work and all these different power works and all that, but just doing basic strength training was kind of like the glue that was holding my body together. And I think you'll find that with a lot of the athletes as well. Can you get strong just for general movements? Can you produce a force for general movements? Like, if you're doing the basics like very, very well, that's probably like 90% of it, I would say, especially for like a sport like rugby league. Okay, because at the end of the day, yes, they need to get stronger. Yes, they need to have body armor, but we just need to keep them healthy so that they can go on the field. Because the intensity, at our intensity of training, we're trying to, you know, meet game demands, if not train higher, so that we have an advantage over our opponents. So that's really, really important that we have this general, these general methods to, you know, basically give us more variability outside of the specificity of training. And I think it's the glue that keeps athletes together, makes them more resilient, robust. And it's probably one of the most important things of like the weight room, I think, or sports.
Yeah. It's I think that once you get outside of the weight room and realize all that can be done outside, from speed, power, just even basic movement competencies, it's interesting because I think creativity is important, and we all want to be able to take things to a creative level, but it's like with time and place, because sometimes the best place for the creativity and really expanding that dynamic is simply on the field or in track.
For sure.
As I've gone in track, it's I'm going to do this on the track. I'm going to find creative speed adaptations on the track. And you might not need to do all sometimes you can, when you hit a plateau and things like that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But much of what's done is on the field and dynamic work.
Yeah. Well, even look at say change of direction in team training, in sports, like initially you might be like, so I know you want to talk about cutting and things like that, but initially you might be very closed in nature because you have, like preseason, we might have 45 athletes on the field, and that could be like a young 17-year-old coming through the ranks who's never been, you'd call, I don't know if you want to say it's correct mechanics, but he might not need to be taught that because he's just a freak. But on the flip side of that, you will have a poor mover who doesn't understand this, and you have to teach them these different types of tools. So you might have a closed environment at the beginning, like dosing in these closed change of direction drills, but you want to get to the point where they're exploring all these different drills on their own terms, and they're perceiving what's happening in front of them, and you have that exploration and training. So I think it's just about layering different things from the beginning of training to where you want to get to, and have an endpoint and goal. That's your exploration within the drills, with your agility tasks. That could be game specific, might not be, could be just reactive in nature. But at the beginning, you probably want to give them this less intense, closed setting just to teach them the mechanics first, so that also at the beginning of, say, preseason, a lot of guys might not have been exposed to this in the off season. You don't know what they've been doing, so it's a safe way to bleed that in and then kind of layer these different stresses on top, so that you kind of get into this exploration stage out in the field, and guys are working what works for them. Everyone has different movements that work for them. It's just bandwidth of guys will have bandwidths of what's optimal, what's not optimal, what's good and what's not good, and exploring those different things is really, really important. But to do that fun stuff, you have to do some of the other stuff before that, I believe.
Yeah,
like that's my thoughts anyway.
Yeah. What are, especially with working with higher level athletes, or even low, whatever you want to speak about here specifically. But I think, like you said, like some athletes are just good movers, and those athletes who are good movers and they play a lot of sports, had a lot of free play, and they're just good athletes. It's a good question to ask. Do you really need to do any special work teaching them how to move on the field? Probably not in those cases.
Probably not.
No.
But like within a team, Joel, you're going to have these high level, but then they're the ones that you see on Instagram. You see the ones that people post up. But for every one of those, there's a very, very poor mover. So how do we get the whole team as a whole progressing forward? So this might not be important for the innate movers, but it will be for maybe the bottom half of the team. That might be really important. But on the flip side of that, you know, when we're in the weight room and we're doing we do specific prep every single day. So the athletes before we start, we'll have individual prep that they'll be working towards what they need to mobilize, what they need to do to get ready for the field. And then say if we have a max velocity theme or a change of direction theme or an agility theme on the field, we're going to target certain things before we go out in the field. So maybe, strengthening his physical properties in relation to that skill might be important for one of these really freak movers. Giving them some more, foot strength or some reactive strength in the lower limb or all these type of things that might have carryover. So we're trying to get, they might need the skills, but you can put them in more scenarios on the field where they can analyze, react. That may help them. Off the field, we can potentially work on, maybe, as I said, lower limb strength, some power, some rate of force development. Whereas the guys that aren't innate movers, we might need to teach them the posture. We might have to go back to a wall drill to teach them what a shin angle is. we might have to do some like skater jumps or something like that to teach them, okay, this is how you orientate your body, and this is how you're pushing into the ground is going to have an opposite reaction of creating horizontal force or whatever to create space to get away from the defender. So I think you're looking for all these different elements for a team sport, which may be on the field, in your warm-up prep, individual prep. Do they have the mobility to get in and out of these positions? Then you might have some plyometric stuff as well. And you're just slow cooking each of these processes with the aim that throughout a season or preseason or a career, all these little things are going to add up and build a better athlete. And, you don't always know how much change you're doing, but if you look at, I was just thinking the other day, I was looking at certain guys, and I was like, these guys are moving well, like compared to like the beginning. And it's just slow incremental changes every single day, just bleeding things in and out, like your plyometrics type thing. We might only do 3 minutes before every field session. And we'll do it on the mats because we've got some really heavy athletes. Doing it on the ground is probably not that great for them, especially if you're doing a 25-kilometer training week, which involves high speed running, change of direction, contact load, all sorts of things that are tough on the joints, the ligaments, the tendons. But bleeding in just these little bits every single day, like, doesn't hurt the system, and it teaches them the skill. Like, before they had no pre-tension at all. Now they do. Now they can cycle their foot up when they do a hop. Before they couldn't. No, is everyone perfect? No, but you're slow cooking that process over a period of time, and you're not breaking anyone in the process. So I think I think things like that add up. They all add up. All these little things add up,
Yeah. So
over time.
And
I think that's really important in a team sport.
Yeah. So in a way, integrating, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, and then I know it was one of the questions we already kind of covered, like, how do you integrate some of these athletic movements for somebody who's already doing tons of movement? And like you said, it's like slow doses of it. I know, like, microdosing, or the idea of like just small doses of lifting, has been talked about for a little while now, but I don't know if, I feel like maybe someone said it at some point on this podcast before, but like, yeah, microdosing little athletic pieces as well, especially when they're doing so many other movements in their sport.
100%. That's definitely key, I believe, for team sports. Like, as I said, we will have a change of direction, acceleration based day in our warm up. The other day might be max velocity, curvilinear stuff. The other 2 days might be a bit more, and within that we also have things that are a bit more specific to each position as well, because the positions within our sport slightly differ. Then the other days might be kind of like more conditioning based, energy system development based in nature. This isn't for preseason, but then you can have these different themes before we even go out in the field. We don't waste a warm up. We're looking at these the physical properties, even the positions and the postures that might be needed for these things, and we're microdosing this every single day. So we might have a circuit of 5 stations. Say for change of direction, one might be a hurdle drill when you're going in and under, and you're trying to like open up the adductors. One might be a wall drill where you're learning just like, okay, this is the shin angle that you need to do apply force. But it's also preparing the calves, your adductors, for more intense stuff when we go out. We might have a skater jump where we're getting in and out of these positions. Then on like an acceleration day, we might have stuff like switching drills, teach the athlete how to switch because they don't know how to switch properly, creates pre-tension of the foot when they're about to land. We might do this on different weights, different surfaces. We might have like different drills where we're trying to get hip extension before knee extension. Then we might have like some bear crawls or something like that, because we know they're going to be contact later in that day. We want to teach body. So there's a lot of general athletic abilities that we can kind of bleed in. We've got some specific stuff that we can bleed in, but we're just dosing this in every single day so that all these little things add up.
Yeah. And it sounds like those types of drills they're relatively low level in the grand scheme of things. It's not like, hey, we're going to go do 20 depth jumps or something like that. No. They're just movement, or more movement oriented than they are like power oriented.
Yeah. And you kind of want to, there might be some potentiation, might be some med ball throws or something if it's a speed day or whatever. but so that when they go out, they're already they're wired, they're ready to go. So then you can get straight into you don't waste too much time. You're not given a huge amount of time when you're running a speed or agility program in team sports, because the skill acquisition and the tactical, especially this time of preseason for us, we're getting ready for trial games, that is takes precedence. So you want to try and bleed this in quickly, so that when you get out in the field, they're ready to go. What's also important is, like, you might be doing like a speed or agility or a change of direction, but it's really important that this stuff has intensity, has energy, because from after this period, they're going into the head coach or they're going to another coach. And if they're low on energy and they're not ready to go, that next drill might suffer. So you need to make sure everything's working, everything's firing, everything's going well, so that they go into the next drill, and then that you start off the training in a very good manner. Because the beginning of training can set up the training for the rest of the session. If that makes sense.
Yeah. What
you can't waste any part of the training.
Yeah, for sure. Just everything seamlessly being efficient. And so with all that, like the movies, I've seen you do a fair amount of curvilinear sprinting. Is there any key concepts there or key things you're looking for in setting it up, or things you're looking for the athlete to be able to accomplish there?
I think so. The main man, I think, for curvilinear stuff is that I hope I get his name right, Alberto Filter, Spanish guy.
Okay.
He's got some of the amazing research out there. So I've seen a lot of like the like a lot of stuff from him, just like in terms of what's more to kind of the systems that I've put in place. But we know that curvilinear running is different to straight line running, and we know it's different to change of direction, because it's different to straight line running because it's a lot slower. You have that the body, the trunk angle is a lot different. And we know it's different to change of direction because it doesn't have a braking force. It shouldn't be braking. And we also know that it challenges the tissues differently. So, the outside leg might target the glutes more, the inside leg might be more adductors. I'm trying to remember. Hopefully that's right. Mm-hmm. We know it different limbs, it targets the hamstrings in a different way. It targets the foot and the lower limb calf muscles or gastroc or soleus in different ways. So for a start, that's preparing our guys, that's making them more robust in these different positions. But then I believe that in a soccer game that they analysed, and I'm not saying this is necessarily true in rugby league or the sports I work in, but 85% of sprints were curvilinear in nature. Okay, so that all of a sudden we know, okay, this is also preparing guys for game demands. So it's specific to what's occurring on the field. And putting guys in these positions to start with, I kind of I call curves, or I call it arcs. I don't know if it's the correct term, it's just what I've made up. And for me, curves are a lot faster in nature. And arcs is when you get that large trunk lean, and the diameter of the run is a lot bigger, so it's a lot slower. So I might have those arcs, I might put them on a change of direction day, because they're bordering on the point where some athletes at the beginning aren't necessarily controlling their trunk, and I'll start cutting with their feet, and I'm trying to get rid of that, teach them how to explore those movements and get that trunk lean and shin angles right, and be able to accelerate through that position rather than breaking side cut type motion. And the other day might be more curvilinear or nature, where they're going for a lot quicker. And it's kind of at the beginning, I might, we might just we might start off a little bit slower with a couple of turns on the curvilinear stuff. Then it might become, okay, they got to do 4 turns. Then we're going to challenge the system a little bit more. We're going to take a little bit wider and challenge them through speed even more. But then we might do it with your hands across your shoulders. Next step might be hands across on your head. Then we'll do it with a rugby ball in your hands. Yeah. And at each corner, you're punching it to the sides. So not only we train the movement, we have its principles like, what's his name? Not Franz Bosch, the other guy. John. Oh, the robust running concepts.
Pryor?
John Pryor. John Pryor.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. He's actually top lad. Those robust running principles where you're testing the system under pressure, perturbations, something is going to be very similar to what's occurring in rugby or team sports. So we might bleed those in for the first 4 weeks of preseason in those controlled matter. And then like after our general preparation period, we're into a specific period now, I kind of separate the forwards and the backs. And I want my forwards just to be able to run through walls and still have that control. But my outside backs, they're on the edges a bit more. They need to have that curvilinear stuff in nature. So now the curves are becoming a little bit more contextual in nature. So we might like even just Wednesday, we had like guys running through curves at speed, and then they have to beat the fullback. So they're getting slung out of the curves, and then they have to beat a defender. But then off that, we might have 2 attackers coming through 2 different curves. So they're hitting the curves, one's got the footy, and then once they enter the field of play, there's a 2-on-1 scenario. But once they hit a certain position, you've got another defender that's scrambling across to help the other defender, so it becomes 2-on-2. So all of a sudden, they're coming out of this curve scenario. It's contextual. They've got a ball in hand, so it's specific to the game. You've got 2 defenders that are creating intensity. And we're putting these positions of arcs and stuff, and we're making it contextual to the game, and we're putting under pressure and perturbations that are key concepts of robust running. So, but we start off very simple, teaching us body mechanics, teaching them to do it at speed, and then we start layering stress as we go along, and then we add decision making to it, because it's not always in our game. It's not always the fastest person, and it's the guy that can make good decisions at high speeds is really, really important. To have the skill and the ability to finish off high-end plays at fast speeds. Can they turn their trunk, catch the ball, make pass, see a defender cut? All these different things are really, really important. But as I said before, I didn't say this before, but a lot of my key concepts are simple to complex, low intensity to high intensity, extensive to intensive. These are key principles that I have across my training block. So whilst exploration and things like this are important, I always begin at the beginning and I layer these things on top, and which gives variability across the time. Because if you jump too far ahead, they'll lose what they needed in the first place. And as we said before, some of those innate movers don't need this. They could probably go straight to the top, but a lot of these other guys are going to miss out on this. And we're trying to push the whole team forward to increase performance. So, yeah, look, I think curvilinear stuff's awesome. I really, especially for like the outside backs that need it in their positions. Whereas the forwards, we even now at the moment we're doing like acceleration based stuff where they're punching different. They might start off with punching balls across the body. They have 5 kilo plates. They have 10 kilo plates, and even I can't believe it. Now we've got aqua bags even the last couple of weeks. Whereas they're punching the aqua bag at 5 meters, at 10 meters, then they're throwing it through 5 meters, trying to hit a target, and then they're sprinting 5 meters, an extra 5 meters. So they're learning to accelerate under these different pressure. They're kind of racing each other to a degree. But these are scenarios that they're going to be put into game-like scenarios. So, it's not just about being quick, being able to change directions really quick. You got to have all these other things in place as well.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the Plyomat. The Plyomat is a jump testing device that allows you to instantly receive ground contact times, jump heights, reactive strength measurements, and more in your training populations. It's easy to use, accurate, and affordable. And an awesome feature that I love about the Plyomat is it easily allows the connection of not just one mat, but you can string multiple mats together for use in things like multi-hurdle hops and bounding situations. I absolutely love the Plyomat, recommend it. And to check it out, you can head to plyomat.net. That's plyomat.net. Yeah. Back to what you were saying about the creativity and just that kind of general idea of creativity that's outside of the walls of the gym. And where my thinking has changed, it's just what you described, the creativity that goes into the curvilinear running. And not just, I think sometimes people would think about that and just think, oh, it's it's only like robust and decision making running, which it is. I mean, it's really helpful, but it's also, like you mentioned, the muscle contribution, because I think if you have your lifting hat on or your physical prep hat on, now you're thinking about, okay, and like you just said, that outside leg, more glute, it's more propulsive. That inside leg has to absorb, and it's like almost overspeed for each leg in a specific job. And I hear all these, and I've seen it myself. I mean, when I warm athletes up playing soccer for a 20-yard dash or a 30-meter dash, they run faster. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I also think that inherently cutting, curvilinear running, the job of the legs, like it's not just technique, it's also development. And if you have, you can have a basic strength program, but then you're doing all this explosive work creatively and legs get overloaded. And now, in addition to what you're doing reactively, I think it's also just a really wonderful physical stimulus. And the one thing I think about too, I haven't done this with a team sport. I did a podcast with Dave Karen about high jump and curve running, and how the difference between radial running and curve running. And I think, some of it might not be there might just be different adaptations depending on what your exact activity is. But I'm very intrigued by also curvilinear running that runs like a conch shell, like a Fibonacci, where it actually tightens as you get in the curve. It like tightens up as if you were running like a route and you had to make that curve tighter at the last second, or like a figure skater, like they have to go and make it. And I'd be curious, like the applicability of that for a team and field sport athlete. I've been doing that with high jump practice. High jump practice lately, usually our curve running drills, we just run around a straight circle. I did it for years. Then I talked to Dave, and I made the circle more of a big long oval. So like part of the curve is slow and easy, and then it gets real tight. And then you have, but your creativity, what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to get carried away, but I'm saying is coaches, even for general, your creativity can really go crazy going and in a specific way for on-field movement, exploring all the different shapes. Like you had said, you'll do a wider curve, a wider arc one day, a tighter arc. I just think there's so many awesome applications, a way to mix all this together.
And that 2-on-1 drill with the scrambler coming in, the variability there is like the arcs is just placed differently each time, and I'll put the defender in a different position, scrambling across, all these type of things. The ball might start in a different position, and you have all these different scenarios, and guys are learning different movements. I remember I used to do it with my just with my private clients. We used to do a bit run circles fast as you can, and then you say change, and they got to break, try and redirect force and go the other way, and then you say, like, they keep going, you go change, and they got to change again. And I remember filming it and looking at the positions they get put in. I'm like, this is insane. Like, they're getting put in crazy positions. Even those arcs, you look at the positions that they get their trunks in. Their trunk and it's like that's sport. Like and you see it, you take a still photo, like this guy is like 45 degrees. Like, how did he get himself in that position? It's awesome.
It's even what you said too, like the idea of the repetition without repetition idea in motor learning, where every rep you do is a little bit different than the one before. And it's cool to think of how many unique, high velocity, high force repetitions you're racking up with all the different ways, using a curve as a medium, like a curved run as a medium.
And it's the same in our specific prep as well. Like you might use like different tools, like you might use plates, different weights, plates, different implements, and you're getting that, the same movement, but it's just in different, you have that variability of using different tools. And, you think hopefully that's making a more robust system to those different positions.
Yeah. If you do have some of those, I've seen a few of your curve running videos, so I know you have a few sitting there on Instagram, but if you have them, I'll put them in the show notes, because I think I'm a visual learner.
I've got some
too.
team stuff. I've got some team stuff I'm probably not allowed to share, but I've got some individual stuff with online clients, but the context stuff, I'm not sure if I can, but one of the thoughts that crossed my mind actually. I can send to you, baby.
Yeah, I was thinking, what a cool training day. Like, all the general contact stuff. This for anybody, like a bunch of general contact stuff, and then a bunch of like general, like different curve run races, like you were saying. Like, what a diverse stimulus, and powerful stimulus that would be. So whatever you send me is cool. Otherwise, I know that you have some stuff on your Instagram I'll throw up there. That would be awesome.
Okay.
Cool. Well,
No worries.
winding down here, I did want to
Yeah,
ask you, these are just some more general physical questions. I've seen you do a
sure.
little bit more like in the realm of like staggered stance, like squatting, like kind of mixing up the way you play with the stance, things
Yeah.
like that. Tell me a little bit about how you're approaching squatting with that.
Well, a lot of the stuff I do myself because I've got a really, really bad back, terrible back. Like I got nerve damage in my calf from an L5S1 disc that shot to pieces. So I have numbness in my left foot. So I like a lot of the staggered positions that upwards my back. So in terms of the unilateral stuff, I play around with that myself. I just do that because it makes me feel good, to be honest, and allows me to probably lift. Like if I do heavy squatting, I can belt squat really well, but back squatting, putting a bar on my back will destroy my back. And I've got a couple of other clients that are like that. So we're lucky we have belt squat, but like sometimes just having those staggered stance positions can really offload those positions and it doesn't irritate them. So I just play around with that myself. But so always people want to argue about the bilateral versus unilateral, and I think both have their places for sure. I'm probably not doing anything groundbreaking in regards to that, but like I my own stuff, I also play around with like staggered stance with hand support. I think that kind of provides the best of both worlds, which is really, really cool. I think the bilateral stuff really is good for the nervous system sometimes. It teaches the body to, override the nervous system and potentially produce more force. Whereas, your more unilateral stuff, you're going to target more stabilizer stuff that's probably needed for you change the direction tasks and just being resilient and robust. And then, I've gone down that route. I didn't even know if you call it unilateral, but like looking at different split squat variations, and you look at, your shin position, and you can look at restoring, the heel rocker mechanics, midfoot position, toe off positions, kind of stuff like I've done both Alex Effer's course, and he talks about that. David Gray I love the stuff he does, and he always talks about his different position, of heel position, getting into the midfoot, getting to the forefoot. And I think you can do that with more of his staggered type and, unilateral, or probably more staggered type positions that allows you to get that foot pressure and feel certain things, control it down. You can feel tissues in different types of way. And it's probably exploring, as you say before, there's different tissues, and giving your body some variability. And sometimes, when you're doing a movement, you might just bypass those parts of the movement, and you didn't realize you're weak in those positions until you do it slowly and in those type of positions. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I've just gone off on a complete rant.
I know what you're getting at. It is funny you mentioned with, you said you were 39 last year. Are you 40 now?
I'm 40 now, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hey, same as me. Nice. Because I actually, last winter was, I've been a little bit more seasonal in my own training. And I went in just a very heavy bilateral strength phase because I hadn't done something like that, really pushed it in a little while. And the winter went well. And then in the spring, I wasn't even doing a workout that was like that substantial. But after it, the strength workout. But then the day after, dude, I woke up and I don't know what happened to my back, but I couldn't do a normal sprint stride for almost 2 months. But in a sense, so I think it was just something that was a little bit of a layover from the heavy strength phase of the winter and just, combined with a lot of mileage. But this winter, I'm still doing the heavy strength phase, but it's in the form of now everything is like, it's with the trap bar, an open stance trap bar, but it's all staggered, curtsy lunge type stuff. And actually, which is amazing, honestly. And I actually don't like the term curtsy lunge because I think people hear that and they think it's like soft. Yeah. It's like, dude, you can crush your glutes in a curtsy lunge. Yeah. It should just be called something else,
And Joel, I feel like when you get to your 40s like us and you've done all the unilateral stuff and you've done all the bilateral stuff and that, you start experimenting with these staggered positions and you're like, I haven't felt this type of burn before. And it's a little bit novel stimulus as well. Because, I love training Muay Thai, and to be honest with you, I used to live in the weight room, I used to love lifting weights, but now it's like, I find lifting weights a bit boring. So like within my own training, I'm playing around with these different things. I'm just trying to feel, like different contractions and different areas and just playing around. My weight training for me is just a bit of exploration and and can I get something out of this? A lot of the time it's probably just junk. Sometimes it's something I take a valuable away and I can kind of put back on my athletes. But like, I kind of use myself as like a little experiment.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, that's all the time. I mean, yeah, we're both 40. Like, how many reps have we done of all the lifts, right? And so for me, so often I love like the rep without rep of just like a staggered stance, hex bar, squat, or whatever, like anything.
Yeah,
it's just fun. Yeah, it's fun to feel too.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you hit a little interesting little track between the stagger. You're like, man, that torched my glutes in a way that I wasn't expecting. You know?
Yeah, like a stagger stance trap bar. Deadlift was torture.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Torture. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I've seen you do some stuff with the flywheel as well, like K-Box. Curious what your thought is for that, either for yourself or for the athletes you work with, how you've taken that.
Well, I played around with myself because I was just doing some experiments. I was trying to increase my striking power. And for me, like striking power is probably, you get it from lower limb. So outside of the skill acquisition element, and you're just looking at the physical properties, you probably want to have like powerful lower limbs and powerful through rotation. So I used a lot of those movements with the K-Box because I feel like it overloads the eccentric system more. I do use it with some return to play guys as well. Now, because it's really hard to put a whole team through a K-Box. Like it's impossible.
Oh yeah, like, it's a lot. Unless you have like 8 K-Boxes sitting around.
And then outside of that, a lot of your like online clients won't have access to a K-Box. But so I use it on myself and with some return to play guys. I'll tell you one thing I really, really enjoy about the K-Box. And it's because if you do it properly, you're getting force down so fast. You have to reverse this eccentric, you have to have this large braking force. And then you're trying to override that with the fast propulsion. But what I will say is, when you're doing normal lifting, you're trying to get this perfect technique, right? With the K-Box, when you're doing it, you get forced out of that technique. Like you can't, it's nearly impossible to have perfect technique. You're getting pushed outside on these bandwidths, on the edges. It's also different because there's no sticking point. You have to produce force the whole time. So you're trying to force yourself out. And I was kind of thinking about this the other day. I find it's probably similar to what happens on a field in some aspects, like you're going to be sent on the edge of your bandwidth in different positions. The repetitions are always different depending on the scenario. And I find the K-Box pushing into these positions like that because it's just forcing you all over the place when you're trying to do it, especially when you're doing it properly with a lot of power.
Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot with it, I mean, really the last, I guess, 5 years, but especially this past year, Keith Barr was on the show talking about like low jerk isometrics, or basically like tendon issues. If there's like a big jerk on the tendon and you have injury issues, that could be provoking it. And it's like what you said, it's interesting. It is like a constant force tool. So like the jerk of the movement is not much. I found it to be really helpful for like, for knees, especially like the squatting type variations. That's been probably my major use of it. So I was just thinking in like a team sports scenario, like you said, it's hard to, hey, got 30 guys, one K-Box, but like.
Yeah. Or we got the K-Pulleys, which we can do some movements on. So we got 2 of those, so you can get guys through that quite quickly. But on the K-Box with the taking on and off the what do you call it, the vest, it's a bit problematic. But with the return to play guys, that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, and wrapping up our chat today, Graeme, is there anything you're up to, any projects? You said like training online or where people can find you, anything you want to mention here before we get out of here? Yeah,
like I've got a thing, I don't know, not sure how many people here are combat listeners, but I've got a thing called Fight Club. So it's predominantly probably Muay Thai athletes, kickboxing athletes, a few MMA, boxing. And it's just like a occurring subscription where I just update the programs and things like that. But it's kind of priced at a really cheap and convenient way for these guys, because a lot of combat athletes, they do a lot of, sacrifices on their working hours to be able to do this. And it's not always a huge amount of money in the trainings, with the competition. So I try to make something that was cover all aspects there. Outside of that, I do a little bit of online training, but I'm just preparing for the competition period in the rugby league. So I don't think I even mentioned I work for West Tigers. So we're going to try and have a big improvement on what happened last year. So it's been really, really exciting. So the majority of my energy is going into that. In a couple of weeks, we go to New Zealand for a quick camp, and we play the New Zealand Warriors across there. And then a few weeks later, as I was telling you before, the first 2 NRL games this year are actually in Vegas. So any of your US listeners, if you like watching guys run at each other, big collisions, watch those first 2 games in Vegas. And you'll be introduced into the game of rugby league.
Yeah. Will you be there? Are you going to be in Vegas?
No, I'm not going in that game. We actually got a first round bye, which was not perfect, but I wish it's probably safer for me to not be in Vegas.
Yeah, we'll keep you away from there.
Good luck to those teams taking those players across. They're going to have to take them off site somewhere, I think.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
As an Aussie coming to Vegas, it's what you see on TV, you know, like all these guys will see it on TV. You're trying to keep them switched on for the game, because I think as an Australian, you always look at Vegas and you see it. Oh, look at this place. It's kind of, as a kid growing up, some of these big US cities before, like, you experience that. It's like what you see on TV. So when you go there as the first time, it's really exciting for people here.
Yeah, might be challenging, a challenge in and of itself. So,
I'm sure they'll all be well behaved, and hopefully, it'll open up the game for a lot of people who watch.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think it'll be really welcome here. I mean, I'd love to watch a game myself. I'm all the way over in Cincinnati. It's a few hours away from flight time.
Just watch it on TV.
But yeah,
you have to watch it on TV.
Yeah,
I'll message you before it happens.
Yeah, please do. I love it. That'll be awesome. I'll definitely try to find a way to tune in. So, well, thank you so much, Graeme. It was really great catching up with you. And yeah, I have a few of these like cross-world conversations lined up. So I'm glad you could make time in the morning and we could make this connection happen. But thank you so much.
Apologies because I took a little bit of time to make this happen.
Yeah.
But actually, I have been busy. Trust me.
Yeah, all good. Glad it could finally happen. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Roll.
Thanks for tuning in to another show. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next week.